I don't want you to comment on the individual case because that's a cop-out of an answer. I want you to answer the question based on the example.
The idea that your practices are creating safer workplaces is something which is up for dispute.
I'd be very interested to know where trade unions sit in this. Where is their voice? Have you carried out any analysis as to how automation has benefited productivity? And then can you also perhaps tell me, how do you make sure that the benefits of that productivity are shared with your workforce?
Absolutely. The use of automation or robotics in our fulfillment centers is not designed to replace or automate out jobs. We target mundane or repetitive or physically or mentally difficult tasks.
Has it done that? Has it actually, jobs are now done by machines and programs that were once done by human beings? That's presumably happened. Albeit not the design.
Yeah, I would suggest tasks within a function might be done. There are over 60 different human-led functions in a given fulfillment center. There's been some press about the number of packages that will be touched by automation, getting closer to 100%. What I would suggest to you is the number of packages that are not touched by humans will continue to be at 0%. This is still a critical part of the value chain. In terms of improving outcomes for people, what we see is an improvement in, safety, the reduction of things like repetitive motion injuries or musculoskeletal disorders, improvements in employee retention. The jobs are more sustainable in an industry where, candidly, logistics, warehousing, and transportation has been subject to high attrition. We continue to perform better than industry on that. And what my colleagues suggested about, again, the importance of transparency, the mental or physical stress that can be present working alongside technology. What we see is when we have a candid conversation, when we have an open dialogue with our people, and we take feedback from them and change systems based on that input to improve how the systems work with them, that serves to mitigate a significant part of that.
So you employ, 70,000 people you talked about?
That's right.
Now, are those people directly in your employ, or are these people who are gig workers, platform workers? What's the proportion? Or is that on top of?
All 70,000 people that I mentioned are directly employed. The majority of those will be in our operation, in our field operations. They're
directly employed, but your business model depends upon an army of people delivering the goods for you who are not directly in your employ. Is that right?
That's correct. Well, when we deliver, you're referring to the last mile. The last mile delivery component. So we do work with a range of transportation delivery companies, from big companies like Royal Mail or multinational like UPS. We also work with our delivery service provider program, which is small, medium-sized delivery and courier businesses that leverage Amazon technology, but those drivers are not employed by Amazon.
Yeah. So the last mile, the actual last bit upon which your whole business model depends, is out with your responsibilities, albeit totally within your control. I mean, you control every element of that person's job. I've been out with an Amazon driver, and I was very interested in your remarks around transparency and tech with purpose and people being at the centre of it. Do you think that those people are at the heart of the people you're thinking about, or are they not your concern?
Well, of course, they're our concern. Our delivery drivers, again, are working through delivery service partners who can choose to use Amazon technology or not use Amazon technology by providing tools like routing software or dynamic systems that allow them to make changes on the fly. That provides a support line for those drivers directly back to us.
Yeah, on that very point, I mean, the driver I was out with, he was very frustrated, not only just having to meander through lanes and narrow alleyways, seeing DPD and Hermes drivers coming the other way, clogging up the roads, but in terms of the programming that Amazon had delivered to him, he wasn't able to have any input as to say, look, this is actually wrong. Can you please listen to me? I do know what I'm talking about. but there was no opportunity. Certainly nobody was listening to him. And I wonder, given all of those responsibilities that you set out, I'd be very interested to know where trade unions sit in this. Where is their voice? Because you talked about the productivities that you're securing through these processes, but I come back to my original question about the benefits being derived for working people. You have responsibilities under ESG, of which you'll be very familiar. How are you discharging those responsibilities if you don't directly employ the people that you ultimately depend upon?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying I'm sorry that you had that experience. Generally, that's not consistent with my time out on the road for Amazon, which I have done both here in Europe and in the United States. The mechanisms to provide feedback to Amazon Logistics, which is the group that you're referencing, are both via the delivery service provider directly, and that is usually kind of collated by them. Or they also have available to them a 24/7 hotline that they can always talk to a human. And I think that ability to engage a human, provide that direct feedback is absolutely vital. And having a human in the loop to make those decisions, we mentioned the algorithm did it. For us, that's never a good enough answer. These are decisions that have to be with a human leader that can review, can understand the nuances of an individual, either in our fulfillment operations or out on the road, those individual experiences, and have the human empathy and leadership that is so important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm struggling to understand how you can apply these standards of behaviours, but you're not even in the room if you're not in that relationship of employer-employee. It's something that you can abrogate your responsibilities for, and your business depends upon it. Don't you think there's a direct contradiction in that model?
I do not. I mean, we're very proud of the delivery service provider program, which has allowed thousands of small delivery companies to grow their business and employ new drivers and grow their workforce.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to issues, one of the big issues that concern people in this space is the development of technologies around surveillance. Mm-hmm. And we've heard a lot said about that thus far. But there's a couple of points to this. I mean, I didn't really think I got much of an answer about my questions about trade union recognition, whether there were collective bargaining arrangements going on, how widespread was that? I'd be interested to hear from you on that, and whether Amazon deploys unionisation heat maps, as has happened in the United States, to see where trade unions are, whether there's a pro-union sentiment. Do those technologies exist within Amazon in the UK? Are those being deployed here?
No, and I will preface this by saying I'm not an employee relations expert in the UK, but the answer is no. We're not tracking union activity or the heat map that you suggested. That's not something that's deployed here.
Well, it's good to know. Well, just pushing a little bit on this, on the technology, on the surveillance issues. The DCMS committee did pursue this question very recently, in earlier this month, and it was Dr. Matthew Cole, you may have heard from the Fair Work Project, told the committee that overwhelmingly the evidence shows that the technologies that Amazon uses are not empowering. They lead to overwork, extreme stress and anxiety, and there have been issues with joints and health problems. He went on to say happier workers are more productive workers, but when you have the level of surveillance and control that Amazon is capable of, it's less concerned with that. So we hear it about people being tracked, their behaviours being tracked. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that, but ultimately, I want you to tell me, who owns that data? Because that ultimately is about another human being, about their behaviours, and decisions are made about their lives with the benefit of that data. Who owns it? Who has access to it? So how are you responding to those challenges?
If I could take the first point regarding Dr. Cole's testimony, and I'll start by saying we agree that unhappy or stressful workers or overwork is not a recipe for a productive workplace. We know that the best in our field operations and fulfillment centers, but this holds true throughout Amazon. The best person in an operation is somebody who's happy with their job, engaged, sees a future there, and is healthy. What's even better than that person is that person backed up with great technology, and that's why we deploy technology in fulfillment centers, for example, that improves or reduces the need to manually scan items, where we can do that with something like computer vision. What we're not doing is seeking to monitor or surveil our people. I mean, that's their privacy is something that we respect. I mean, we do have things like CCTV at the entrance to the building, but when someone is working in a fulfillment center, when they're at a station, the focus of the software and hardware that we've been discussing is on the goods. It's not on the people themselves. You know, on your point about data, and this is another very important point. I mean, we do collect and keep data that is legally required, a next of kin and employment information and things like that. We do also keep things like performance data as we, work with people and identify areas where we need to improve. But that data is accessible to those people, and they can request with us or see it through our internal system. We have online tools that are made available to every single employee, and they all have access to that data.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think that's probably enough from me.
Can I just check something? I think you just said to the committee that the collection of data was based on your goods, not your people. That's not quite right, is it?
I'm sorry?
You just said to the committee that your collection of data, presumably in a warehouse, was focused on the goods, the boxes of stuff you're shipping out, as opposed to your people who are packing things and moving them around. I just want to check, that's not actually correct, is it?
That is correct. I mean, the systems that are deployed, the primary purpose of the systems is things like monitoring the productivity of the network, the health of the network, so that we can ensure that we're planning correctly and matching capacity and demand, so that even our busiest time of the year, the fulfillment center will look about as it does in July or March. Secondarily, we use these systems for things like inventory control, like any retailer would. But the point about looking at performance, that's not where we focus when we deploy these systems. They're not primarily or even secondarily to identify underperformers. And performance-related feedback is really focused on safety and what we would consider internally quality, not on things like speed or productivity.
So let me give you an example. I represent a constituency that has one large Amazon fulfillment center and another one just on the border. It's a couple of years ago now, as a constituent who was 63, he was working with you just to fill his time before his pension. And he came to see me in my surgery to tell me that, I don't know if it was a wristband or a device or a tablet, we had some kit that basically told him he wasn't packing things quickly enough. And he'd had 2 strikes already. And he had to go and see his productivity manager. So he went to go and see the productivity manager, and the productivity manager said, "Why are you not packing things more quickly? The system is telling us you're not being productive enough." And he said, "I'm 63. He said, "I'm working as quickly as I can. It's pretty cold in here. I can't go any quicker." Now, if you were to take that example outside of the kind of technology discussion, you'd have some real concerns around age discrimination. But this was your technology tracking that worker's productivity in packing. That is surveilling the worker, isn't it, not the goods?
I'm not familiar with that particular example, but...
Yeah, I don't want you to comment on the individual case because that's a cop-out of an answer. I want you to answer the question based on the example. Do you track the productivity of your workers in your warehouses, yes or no?
Yes.
So what you just said to the committee, that you don't track the worker, is not true, is it?
What I said was the systems are not focused on tracking individual workers.
What do you mean by focus?
That their primary purpose is not to track individual productivity.
You understand from the worker perspective, if they've got a bit of kit or a device that's saying you need to be quicker, quicker, quicker all of the time, from the worker's perspective, that feels like the focus is on them, doesn't it, not the good? Do you recognise that?
We do, and since that you suggested this a couple of years ago, we have made changes in response to employee feedback on how those metrics are assessed. As I said, early in the tenure, when you're starting out at Amazon, productivity is not a factor in performance evaluation. We focus on safety, whether that's
He told me he was going to be fired if he'd had 3 strikes on his productivity tracking. Are you saying that's not Amazon policy?
The number of performance-related folks that leave the company is a very, very small minority. That is not where we focus. And if there are issues where someone is having performance-related issues, we want to understand why and how we can help them, or maybe that's not the right function for them to be performing within the fulfillment center.
It's really important that you answer the question I'm asking you. I asked you, if someone has 3 productivity kind of flags on the system, can they be fired at that point?
I mean, yes, yeah.
Okay. What you just answered when I asked you that question before was something entirely different. Now you're giving me the actual answer to my question. Do you not recognize that's a problem? There's an algorithm here tracking a human worker. The computer assistant is saying this person's not quick enough, which, to be fair to him, the guy was 63. And then you were going to sack him based on what the algorithm decided was whether he was productive or not. That's an issue, isn't it?
But to be clear, the algorithm is not making those decisions.
No, let me tell you. So the conversation that he had with his productivity manager was, well, the system told me you're not being productive enough. That's not a human in the loop. That's a human telling another human what the computer told him.
But, well, the important thing is that this is an ongoing conversation between the manager, between on-site human resources, which are there, and between the employee, where we identify issues with performance. And again, we would recommend that we perform a different function within the fulfillment center. Again, as I mentioned, there are over 60, and I've worked in fulfillment centers early in my time at Amazon. Of course, there are performance benchmarks that we set based on similar groups of people. They're not constantly ratcheted up. That's not a practice that we engage in. It is self-defeating and uneconomical to create an environment where people feel like they're constantly being ratcheted up. We have to continue to work with our employees, identify areas where we need to make changes, where we can improve. And if, again, as I said, if the issue is performance at a specific function, the vast majority of the time what happens is that employee will be asked to perform a different function, or they can go to HR at any given time and raise these concerns directly with them.
My constituent didn't feel like that, I'm afraid. Charlotte Nichols, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Palmer, documents filed by Amazon to the US National Labour Relations Board reveal that between September 2017 and August 2018, about 300 workers were let go at its Baltimore warehouse for what the company called productivity reasons. This was more than 10% of the workforce. The company's lawyer wrote that, and I quote, Amazon consistently terminates fulfillment centre associates for failing to repeatedly meet the standardised productivity rate, end quote. Was that productivity rate based on AI or other forms of algorithmic working?
No.
So Amazon extensively uses AI for other purposes. Why don't you use it for warehouse performance management? And isn't that at odds with the answer that you just gave to our chair moments ago?
No. The software that's deployed in a fulfillment center is not designed to set benchmarks independently or automatically. These are benchmarks that are set based on achievable performance levels, based on historical performance, and that are reviewed by human leaders before they're put in place. It is not independently or automated from a decision standpoint.
Okay, so analysis shows that November is the worst month for ambulance call-outs to Amazon fulfillment centres. There's almost a 50% increase between October and November every year over the last 5 years. It seems to me, with an Amazon fulfillment centre in my constituency, that there are human beings being pushed beyond the limits of endurance by productivity targets set at least in part by robots. You worked in a senior role for Amazon in the Washington-Baltimore area while the layoffs that I discussed earlier were taking place. Do you feel personally conflicted about more than a tenth of the workforce being laid off for productivity reasons?
I did not work in the Washington area at that time. I think I was based in Seattle in 2017. And I'm not familiar specifically with the case that you're raising. What I can tell you again is that performance-related decisions are the very small minority of people that leave the company. That's and it's not a decision that's made in real time. It's not as if you've had a bad day and that's what the computer spits out. This is a discussion that is ongoing with the human manager to identify areas where you can improve performance. And we recognize that warehousing jobs are not for everyone. But what we've been able to accomplish through the deployment of technology is an environment that is significantly safer than industry and has significantly better retention rates than industry.
And I think it's clear from what I said about ambulance call-outs at UK Amazon fulfillment centres compared to other similar-sized logistics firms within the UK that the idea that your practices are creating safer workplaces is something which is up for dispute. But in any case, based on the discussion that we've been having here and the well-publicised labour problems within Amazon in the UK, including spontaneous walkouts earlier this year with concerns over safety, with GMB on the next panel representing workers in Amazon warehouses and courier services, and Prospect on the panel representing tech workers, do you think that it might be time that Amazon recognised a trade union and worked with trade unions to resolve some of these issues?
Well, again, I'm not an expert in employee relations here in the UK. What I'll tell you is we respect the right of our employees to join a union. We have always supported that right. And at this time, no union represents an Amazon site in the UK. But we are entirely supportive of our people's right to join a trade union.
You can't. Your respect for somebody's right to join a trade union is immaterial. It's their inalienable right. Your respect to it is irrelevant. It's your ability to recognise trade unions and their ability to bargain with you on a collective basis. Sorry, Chair, but surely that's the key point that you're not answering.
I'm sorry. Shouldn't.
I think what my colleague is saying is that workers in the UK have a right to join a trade union, immaterial of whether that's something that Amazon supports or doesn't. Our question is about whether Amazon should take the proactive step to recognise those trade unions and to collectively bargain with them in order to resolve some of the issues that we've been talking about today with Amazon and the way that technology is deployed within its workplaces, in the hope that some of these issues might be actually resolved.
We'd welcome that.
And I'm not an expert in UK employment law, but where we can work directly with our people, which is what we've been doing, we will continue to do that. And if a workforce or a site is represented by by any trade union, then we're happy to have that conversation. That's just not the case today.
I'm sure that GMB colleagues on the next panel will be very happy to hear that you're pleased to talk with them in future, as I know there's a number of outstanding issues at your warehouses in the UK.